Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer and today I'm Gamesplaining February. So this is February's top 10 list. I managed to get enough games played. I didn't think I was going to get there, but then I had a day of playing and we're here. Nowhere near the final number that I managed to knock over in January, but that's okay. I will get back to it. We'll keep pushing forward and games are getting played, so that's really cool. So let's get straight into it. My top 10 list for February. My number 10 game is Pastali. Pastali is a surprisingly simple game, but horrendously complex at the same time. I have done a Gamesplainer of this one, so you can have a look at it to see what it's about. But in essence, you have a path that is created by a line between 2 points and 2 points. So there's two paths you're playing with on the board. You are putting in tokens, elements that change where that path goes. So you can create paths that actually go for a really long time to get from point A to point B. You can move the tokens around so you can get onto those paths. You are allowed to stack the pieces on top of each other. And if you can go through one of those stacks that is higher, you get more points for it. That's pretty much the game. I've really enjoyed it, but every time I've played it, I think there's been a real, oh yeah, this is easy. No, this is not easy. And it's like you can feel everyone at the table just go vroom into themselves and start thinking about all the patching different spaces that they could get to. So it's a really wonderful game. I really enjoy it. But that was my number 10. My number 9 game for February is Catch the Moon. Catch the Moon is a dexterity game. It's literally putting some ladders on top of other ladders or trying to kind of balance them in a way that they don't fall down. And that's pretty much it. The idea is you roll the die and the die will tell you if you can touch one ladder, 2 ladders, or if you have to have the highest point on the setup. Sometimes I play this game really well, sometimes not really well. It depends on how shaky my hand is at the time, I guess, or who I'm playing with. I've really enjoyed it, and every time I've brought it out, people go, oh, this one, great, let's go. And there's just an enjoyment on this one. There's not a heap of thinking that needs to go on. You can have your conversations, and when it gets to your turn, roll, place thing, and back to your conversation. And that's kind of nice. You need those downtime games, the games that are easy and simple to play, to just give your head a little bit of a break from the slightly heavier stuff. My number 8 game for February is Colt Express. Now, I played Colt Express this time with one of the expansions plus the DeLorean expansion, which is kind of a special thing and you've got to go hunting to be able to actually get that one. And I really enjoyed it. I lost horrendously, but I really enjoyed it. What I've noticed is the people who know the base game, when you add the expansion in, so we're using the Stagecoach expansion, there is another expansion which we could have used and we're going to use, but I could just sense the table just going, at all the rules and sensations of what needs to go on to get from one thing to another thing within that one expansion. So I thought better of it and pulled the other expansion out of the way. This is the first time I've ever played with expansions, so I did appreciate that. I really enjoyed it. What I noticed is that I lost horribly. Everyone else who started at the back of the train also lost horribly. Those who started at the front had a chance at doing well, and they were kind of grappling over getting that suitcase from the locomotive and getting across into the stagecoach to get the suitcase out of that stagecoach, and then kidnap the people from the stagecoach. All these things added onto their points. So I think the person who ended up winning was somewhere in the vicinity of $3,000, whereas I was kind of maybe around 750. There's a huge gap. So you really do need, with this game, to keep track of what you're doing. If you haven't played Colt Express, you're literally choosing one of the cards that has come into your hand and placing it depending on what the journey is, and they all get placed in, and then they all get played in order. So what someone else does may affect where you are, so it's going to change what actually happens with your card. It's a really wonderful game. I really enjoy it each time that it comes up. I don't know if I'll do the expansion thing again, or I think that with expansions, especially with these expansions, you need to play the game often to make them worthwhile and to actually understand what you're doing and to do it really well. My number 7 game for February is Fast Sloths. I really like Fast Sloths. I think it's one of these games that hits my top 10 list really often. I've played it quite a few times. It's a different game than a lot of the other games. The essence of the game is that you're a sloth, so you don't want to move, so you need to catch a lift with other animals to pick up the leaves around the board. And that's pretty much all you're doing. The problem with the game is that it looks like it's Euro-ish, but in actuality, it's just a race game. As soon as you can get your head around that, it actually changes how you play and how you approach it. I think on my first play of this one, I was in that Euro mode rather than the race game mode. And so I didn't quite grapple with, this is what's happening. But now that I've played it and I've got expansions and I've played it quite a fair amount, it's a really good game, and I won this time that I played it. I fear that I've lost most other times, but that's absolutely fine. My number 6 game for February is Room 25. Now, Room 25 is a little bit of a surprise game. I tend to push it to the side and not really look at it. I just had a lot of people at the table, and so it fulfilled the ability to have everyone playing is really what it came down to. The way this game plays is you're choosing 2 actions that you can do on your turn, and you'll only do those actions when you get around to your turn. So what other people do could affect where you are when you do the action. And you're looking for rooms, or you're going through rooms looking for an exit. It's kind of a futuristic game show type idea where people die, is the whole idea of it. I tend to play this game with the rebels, I guess you call it, with the guards, I think is the actual name on the cards. And so you're never quite sure who the guards are or where they are until they actually say, oh, I'm a guard. And they're allowed to say that. Now, I find with this game that it either works really well, or it goes super short, or it goes super long. And we actually ended up having 2 games of it because the first game barely got around the table before it was over. Because people just died really quickly by just literally stepping into a room and the room killed them. They should have looked first and gone, don't use that room. Let's use something else. So on the second game, people were doing that. And what I found on the second game, everyone was kind of clumping together and just, I'll have a look in that room. Okay, that one was fine. I'll step into that room now. And everyone was kind of moving all together, and we struggled to find the escape. But when the escape was found, a few of us got into it, and we couldn't quite get the other people into that room, and they ended up dying. And the whole kind of the end of the game is that if 2 of the people who are actually trying to escape die, then they lose and the guards win. I enjoyed it, but it was right on the edge of a little bit too long when we got to it. Simply because the amount of time it takes to get back around to your turn is quite substantial when people are thinking about what they're doing. If they just go, you might have a chance. But it is a larger player count game that could do with not quite being as large as it is. My number 5 game for February is Babylonia. Now, Babylonia is a game that I did the games plan for only last week. I enjoyed the game. I quite enjoy this game. I think it's just sits on the table and it's thinky enough without being overthinky. The whole idea of it is that you're placing markers out onto the table if they're farmers, or if they're I think they're royalty markers or something like that. I can't think of the exact name of them, but those are the 2 options. If you're placing only farmers, you can place 3. If you're placing any royalty markers at all, you can only place 2 things out, and you're getting points for what you're next to. In fact, there's a few different areas of scoring, and playing into those areas of scoring is actually what it comes down to. If you're able to place a marker that will actually score you a few different things, that's a really good way to play the game. There's enough thinking on this one to make it really worthwhile and worthwhile having a look at. It's one that's kind of flown under my radar. I think it came out in 2019 from memory, but I only just came across it a month back or 2 months back, and it's a worthwhile game to have a look at if you haven't come across Babylonia before. It is a Reiner Knizia game, so you have some pedigree on the designer, and you kind of what you're stepping into when you get it. My number 4 game for February is Alma Mater. Now, I played Alma Mater quite late at night. I don't know if that had any impact on the way I played, but I did not play well. In fact, thinking about it, I did not play well and have not played this game well at all. The people I was playing against played well, even though they hadn't come across it. There's something with the cards that you get at the beginning that are going to give you stuff. And if you can get those cards at the beginning, you are set up for the entire game. In fact, there were 3 of us playing. 2 of us looked at the card that the 3rd player got at the beginning and said to ourselves, he's going to win. without even having played the game. And we were absolutely correct. He won. It's a tough game if you don't have one of those cards that makes things easy, which is getting money in or getting the appropriate books in. If you can get a card that's going to give you that stuff early on, then it's a really easy game. If you can't get one of those cards early on, it's really tough. Really hard game, really tight, and you're kind of really struggling to do things. I'll leave that one there. Have a look at my Gamesplainer Gamesplanation of that one to get a feel for what I'm actually talking about with that and the feel of it. My number 8 game for February is The Crew. This game tends to find its way into my top 10 every month, at least recently, or every other month recently. It's a really good game. I really appreciate this. I don't know if it's because I grew up playing 500 and Euchre and the trick-taking games that come with that you normally play with a standard deck of cards, or if there's something else about it, but I actually really enjoyed it. The Crew is a co-op game. You're literally playing a trick-taking game, but it's co-op. And so what you're trying to do is the person who has a little card in front of them needs to win the trick that has that card in it. And so you're all working together to enable that to happen. We only had one game of it this time around because we ran out of time. It was just literally filling some time until some other players got there. But we lost, and I think it's because it was a low card and given to the person who actually had that low card, and they didn't have much else in that suit, so it became very difficult to get rid of those other suits for him to be able to then win the trick with that low card. So sometimes you're going to come up against that. Sometimes you'll find it really easy, and it really depends on where the cards land. I just really enjoy this game, and I think it's a worthwhile game to have a look at. I will never do a Gamesplain of it, simply because you need the 4 players or the 3 players, whatever number of players it is. You need them because there's information that you don't have, and that's a really important part of the game. My number 9 game for February is Awari. Now, Awari is getting its Gamesplain this week, so please go ahead and watch that Gamesplain Gamesplanation to get a feel for the game and what it's about. Awari is a game where you have 3 cards in your hand and you're selecting, out of those 3 cards, they're showing an area on the board. You can play all 3 of those cards if you want, but you're only able to put 2 pieces out onto the board. So the reason you play 3 cards is if you have 2 of the same type of card or area type card, they can act as a wild for another area. So you could play all 3 with 2 of the same and 1 something else, and these 2 acting as if they're the second one of the something else. You can then put 2 pieces into that same spot. So there's a couple of different spots on the board that have that type of land. So you can put into 1 spot alone 2 pieces, and that's pretty much it. You move through the game. There are 2 areas of scoring. There's scoring tents that have been placed out, and that happens at the end of the first half of the game. So when the deck runs out, you'd score tents, and then you shuffle them, the discard pile, put them all back in and keep going. And then when you get to the end of the game, you score tents again, and you then score these totems and the kind of settlements, I think they call it. There's a lot to think about with this game. There's a lot hinges on the cards that come into your hand. But look, I'll leave it there. I won't spoil this one. Please go ahead and watch my Gamesplanation from this weekend to get a feel for what that game actually is. My number 1 game for February is Parish New Eden. Parish New Eden is a bit of a surprise to me. It's a post-apocalyptic game, but I said this in my Gamesplanation of it, or in my introduction of the Gamesplanation, that it's post-apocalyptic, but it doesn't have the negatives of post-apocalyptic game probably feels like it probably should have. But I wonder if that's because of the title, Parish New Eden. So it's a good thing. And so you're doing all the post-apocalyptic game type stuff of trying to get people in who will be able to get food and all these different technologies and things like that. And you try and join them all in. But there's no negative if you don't manage to get that. There's only positive of if you do, you get extra points. It's an interesting way to play. It's an interesting thing to kind of move through. I actually really appreciate this game. I like it. The whole idea on your turn is you're just selecting a die, but that die will show the face of a person whose skill you can use, and it's coming from an area, and you get to use that skill of that area just the once. And so once all the dice are gone, then you're selecting other cards with the dice that you've picked up. There's a lot going on with this, a lot to kind of get your head around. But once you get your head around it, it plays really nicely and really easily, and it just flows is really the best way to say it. So look, that's my top 10 from February. I will leave it there. If you have any games that you would like to be gamesplayed, please shoot me an email to thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter @thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games that I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.